every single one of you, if you have a dream like Ellen, if you see something that needs fixing, and God knows, as Bob said yesterday, a lot of things need to be fixed. Those of you who have the privilege of working for the corporates have the opportunity to go to that corporate and say, hey, let's use the resources of that massive corporate, which is so efficient, to start fixing things. And there you've got examples of things just starting to be right things. So, feeding into that, this next session is on the effect of climate change, and particularly to talk about climate justice. And here to introduce it is a 3-time One Young World Ambassador who's worked at the UN Secretary General's Office on Sustainable Energy for All initiative. She's currently taking a year out from her stellar career at Accenture to run Kenya Green Power Supply, which is a One Young World inspired initiative with a fellow One Young World ambassador, Kevin Musila in Kenya. And their aim is to increase the access to sustainable energy in rural Kenya. So, a fantastic One Young World ambassador. Please welcome Marielle Phillitt.
Morning, everyone. Mary Robinson, last night you called for transformative leadership. I hope I am meeting your call for transformative leadership. We are trying so very hard. As Kate mentioned, my name is Marielle, and this past year, I started a climate justice business in Kenya with a Kenyan One Young World delegate. We are selling solar home systems in rural areas. Mary, you asked for vision. We have a vision that all those households in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, South Sudan, and other African countries surrounding East Africa that do not have electricity will soon have electricity from individual solar household systems, which will meet all of the electricity needs of a household at a fraction of the cost of grid connection and will maintain the carbon neutrality of the households. These households are the most sustainable households on the planet. We'd like to keep it that way. We also have a vision that those in the United States, Europe, and China will learn from these customers, see the benefits of generating their own energy, and will begin to utilize solar or other renewable energy sources to individually power their households. In this way, and ironically, those who have suffered the most from climate change and have done the least to cause it will bring upon the energy revolution that the world needs. In short, we want to do a very simple but hard thing. We want to change the way people get energy for the first time and the way that people use energy in their house. Africa is the perfect place to start from scratch on energy. A solar home system comes with a solar panel, a battery, some lights, and a mobile phone charger. It mimics the presence of electricity in the house. Our customers are not typical energy users like we have in the United States or other countries. They do not require so much energy, and they have very little to purchase it. Today, I've been invited by the Mary Robinson Foundation, Climate Justice, which I thank very much. On the eve of the 2014 Climate Summit in New York City, I attended a joint session between the Mary Robinson Foundation and UN Women, where I met a group of amazing women fighting against the effects of climate change in their daily lives at the grassroots level, and those who support them at the higher levels in their plight. The message on climate justice was all the same: respect and protect human rights, support the right to development, share benefits and burdens equally, ensure decisions on climate change are participatory, transparent, and accountable, and highlight gender equality and equity. By setting up a business that only makes money if we respect the customer and their needs and wants, our business adheres to the principles of climate justice every day and services those who have previously been underserved. Access to energy is a human right, and it's necessary for parents to provide a better life for their children, which we all want to do. So, if I haven't been able to inspire you yet on this issue, then it's my honor to introduce a remarkable woman who will. You saw her last night, and we're so lucky to have her here again. Mary Robinson is a woman of so many accomplishments. I'll just mention a few. She is the president of Mary Robinson Foundation on Climate Justice. She's the first female president of Ireland, a real inspiration to generations of women in not only Ireland, but around the world. She's a member of the Elders, a group of world leaders brought together by Nelson Mandela to help inspire solutions to many intractable problems. She was the chancellor of the University of Dublin Trinity College, and as of this July, she's the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy on Climate Change. So, please welcome Mary Robinson.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Morning. Good morning. And first, could I just say to Marielle, yes, you are a transformative leader. I'm really very impressed with what you're doing and that you're doing it the climate justice way. Last night, I spoke more generally about the fact that we are facing a big challenge because we're not on course for a safe world because of climate change. But this morning, I want to hear your views and listen to you and talk together about climate justice. Climate justice is a term that people aren't quite as familiar with. They're becoming more familiar. We saw a lot of it on the march in New York, where 400,000 people. The words climate justice kept being used in all different ways by that diverse crowd. But in our foundation, we link human rights, development, and climate change, because the Human Rights Council has acknowledged the negative impact of climate on all kinds of human rights. Rights to food, rights to health, right to life itself, being forced to migrate, leave your home because of flooding or severe drought. And there's an injustice about climate that we have to take on board. It is already affecting the poorest countries and the poorest communities, even very poor communities in rich countries. We saw that with Hurricane Katrina and more recently with Sandy. There are still people trying to recover in New York and New Jersey, poorer parts, who are so devastated because they're very poor. But it's very, very evident all over Africa. It's what brought me into climate change. I was working on health issues, including health in Sierra Leone, which is now suffering from the terrible Ebola outbreak. And I was working on women, peace and security and on corporate responsibility. And we were a small outfit called Realizing Rights, based out of New York and Geneva and Washington. And we had to partner with a lot of other partners. So I was traveling to different African countries, and I kept hearing this same sentence, more or less, but things are so much worse. And it was about climate shocks. It was about in Liberia that the rainy seasons were very predictable until about 10 years ago. And now they don't come at the same time, they come for longer, or they don't come at all. In northern Uganda, my friend Constance O'Kellett said when she was growing up in her village, they had normal seasons. Now, she says, it's long periods of drought and flash flooding, and her village is destroyed, and she's got a women's group holding it together. The gender dimensions, I was very glad Marielle brought that out, are huge. Because when you undermine poverty, it's women who pick up the pieces, who become the leaders in their local community to adapt, to be resilient, to try to do things. So we have to ensure that women's leadership is to the fore and that it's understood that there are these gender dimensions. But you've been hearing quite a lot of speeches this morning, I noticed, and I want to kind of get a crowd response from you. I want your help in promoting the ideas of climate justice, that we get the energy to the poorest in the way Marielle is doing. Do you know how many we're talking about? 1.3 billion in our world of 7 billion have no access to electricity. 2.6 billion still cook on open fires with charcoal and wood and animal dung and inhale smoke, and 4 million die every year, and they're mainly women or even children standing around while their mother's cooking. So we have a big constituent of about 3 billion out of our 7 billion world who are very energy poor and whom we have to prioritize because we owe it to them in justice, because our lifestyles are undermining their poor life chances. And all the development aid of the last many years could be completely undermined. So it is a big issue, and it's an issue for young people like you. I want more transformative leaders like Marielle. I really feel we can learn from good examples, learn from what is happening. So if you're doing something that fits into a climate justice mode, tell me about it. Over to you now. I'm going to put my spectacles on, because otherwise I won't be able to see those at the back, because I am, after all, an elder. But I can see everybody now, including up on the balcony. So who wants to start? Okay, can you find the mics? Okay, don't be shy. There's a bonus for the first one. Good. Hi.
Not a shy group.
Yesterday, Sir Bogdanov was talking about the
They've got to get to the
situation
mics.
that poverty means that people has not food, that people has not possibility to electricity. And right now you're also talking that it's about getting electricity for the poorest one, because they're the ones that have most of the dangers of climate justice. So the big question here is, how do we get wealth to be spread on the poorest people? And I think that's one of the things that we've been trying to do for many years, and we still don't find the way to distribute wealth between the different countries.
Well, I do very much agree with the way you've put the question. It is about poverty, and in this case, it's about energy poverty, because we're talking about undermining people's food security, health, development, and what do we do to prioritize and compensate for that, give them the benefits. And the benefits are renewable, clean energy, and there are a lot of opportunities now to do that. But how do we scale it up? I am on the advisory board of the Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves worldwide. And the Global Alliance set itself what seemed to be a very ambitious target to reach 100 million households by 2020. Very big, but when you put 100 million side by side with 2.6 billion by 2020, and then when will we get to the other? If we go by 100,000, we're not going to get there. And that's the big challenge. And so what my foundation has been trying to suggest to the World Bank and others is, why not look at the social protection systems in countries where governments have already prioritized their poor, and they give the income to the, food to the mother if the children go to school. They look after, certain health issues. Sometimes they're productive and they give a goat or some chickens for productive work. And energy hasn't been sufficiently in that mix. And I think if poor families have clean energy, it changes everything. It frees up the time of women who don't have to go miles for firewood and destroy trees. Children can do homework in the evening. They can charge telephones and mobile phones and earn an income. There are all kinds of ways it changes lives. So the scaling up, which I think is what you were talking about, is what we really need to do. And I would urge you, countries, look at the social protection systems in countries and see how we can get energy in. But now I see more people coming, so please.
Thank you very much.
I'd love to know, just your name and your country. Yeah.
Philip, France and Australia.
Okay.
I have a quick question. I work on the industry side, which pollutes a lot, but when we talk of climate change, we often say that we have to make efforts in our households and we forget the industry. One of the things that helps make innovation more available is a market. And I can't help but notice there's no green market for green energy or for small energy for local production. So I'd like your opinion on the idea of creating a market where that energy and those systems are traded, just those specifically, so that they can be made more available.
That's a really interesting idea. I participated in a market being created for vaccinating the poorest children. For a number of years, I was chair of the Gavi Alliance. And it was deliberately created with a lot of support from the Gates Foundation, but also with the UN, governments, pharmaceutical industry, everybody involved, because they knew we wouldn't reach the poorest children with vaccination unless we created a market, precisely. And I think, follow that idea. You'll do it better than I could. But it is a very good idea to create that market, because that's the way and I think we need to be market-based and social protection-based, and even the private sector working with governments on social protection, which doesn't happen normally. But there is a way of doing it. We did it to vaccinate poor children, and it made a big difference. So, right on. Okay, on this side.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tata Katlanga, and I'm from South Africa. And I'm a co-founder of a company that innovated the Repurposed School Bag. It's made from, it's basically an upcycled solar-powered backpack. So it's made from plastic shopping bags, which we upcycle with a staff of 8, 6 of which are women. And the solar panel charges as kids walk to school, and when they get home, they can actually use it as a light to study.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
Thank you. And what we've basically tried to do is we've tried to take the concept of innovation and design and doing more with less and make it more understandable and more tangible for kids, you know, that do need to study. So I just wanted to share with everyone the work that we're doing. And if you're interested, visit our website at www.repurposed school bags on Twitter or at official Rethaka, R-E-T-H-A-K-A. Thank you.
Well, congratulations. And not only are you doing something very useful, but you're educating a whole new generation into the possibilities of you know, having clean energy and being able to do it themselves. And so well done. That's great. On this side? Hi.
Hi. My name's Olivia Laskowski. I'm from Australia. I'm really interested in connecting with yourself, Marielle. I volunteer with an organisation in Australia called the Alternative Technology Association. They do projects in rural communities in East Timor, very similar, small solar systems, just with lighting, to go into communities that will never have access to electricity. So I'm really interested in connecting with you, learning how you're doing this in Kenya. There's a Siemens One Young World group here that also did this in Mexico. So I'd like all those groups to connect together and share the learnings. If we could organise that. I know there's a session on Saturday, but if we can organise that prior as well.
I would really encourage that. There must be a lot of really good ideas and experience in this area. And if you could all connect, because I know you have a year as ambassadors. So, Marielle, do you want to respond?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we can meet up during lunch. Just find me somewhere. I'll be at the front. I don't know where I'll be.
Okay.
But also, we have some microphones up at the top.
Oh, yes. Okay, sorry, up at the top, yes. I'll try to be very quick in my answers, because I'd like to get all the questions in.
Hi, this is Jay. I'm visiting from the United States. And I've noticed two trends throughout the conversation over the last few months and years, but also even today. One is this idea of a circular economy, and we've seen some great examples, but a lot of what I've seen has been very centrally planned, and it's more like a massive distribution system. But in a lot of these developing markets, there's so many breaks in the system that you have to create much smaller, more decentralized ways of working. And so what I'd like to learn more about today is ways in which we have mini circular economies. Because it's not just about creating the technology and delivering it, it's about creating the supply chains, creating the manufacturing parts, creating an entire new economy so that you're involving the local population in the establishment and the self-perpetuating of these mini circular economies, but in such a way that every village can have their own circular economy. It's not necessarily dependent on one power plant or one distribution system that can be broken down at the national level.
Yeah. I very much agree with that. I love that idea, a kind of bottom-up and listening to local communities, because they know best in their own community, and involving them and, you know, sort of helping what is already probably a very adaptive community to become fully a circular economy community. I think that's a great idea. I think I was coming over here, and then I'll come back there, and then up. Yeah, okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ray Jan from Kurdistan. I have a question for you, please. Is it possible to achieve sustainable growth in the world without hurting the natural resources and the world any further than we're hurting it right now?
That's a very, very vital question. It's the one we're looking at. To be sustainable, we have to stay below 2 degrees Celsius, a pathway, because that's what governments have agreed is what will have a relatively safe world. It won't be quite as good as it is now. There'll be more climate shocks, but it'll be livable. So it's as serious as that. How do we do it? I think it's very important that we do it with equity, with fairness, because it's not fair on some of the larger emerging economies who have large poor populations to expect them to act as quickly as the richer parts of the world, who after all are more responsible historically as well. And that's in the convention. It talks about common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. So, you know, that has to be honored. And we have to do as much as possible. But I think from a climate justice perspective, it will be a good part of that if we say we want sustainable energy for all. So we want to reach that over 2 billion energy gap as a priority. That will change their lives. It'll take them out of the poverty that they're in fact, and it's a good way. But we also need governments. Now, in this next year, as I was explaining, we have the important decision-making. By next March, every country has to indicate their intended, nationally determined commitments on climate change. Every country, large and small. And we heard a bit of that at the Climate Summit. I was very impressed by Samoa, saying it's going to go to zero carbon by about 2025 or 27, I think it was. Costa Rica, the same thing. Ethiopia, smaller countries. Some of the bigger countries came and they talked, but they didn't say anything. You know, now they have to say it by March, and indeed the European Council has to say it by October. So, you know, we have to do it fairly. And I really appeal to you, young leaders in your countries, to raise the bar on that and say we have to move to renewables rapidly, but we must do it fairly, with equity. Thank you. This side, and then I'll come up to the balcony again.
Hi.
Oh, two balconies. Okay, well, look, I forgot about you. Please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nondumisa, and I'm from South Africa. Mm-hmm. I'm a mining engineer, and we mine coal. So my question is, how can we protect our world in terms of climate change and at the same time create jobs? Because we still have these resources that can last us up to 20 years. And then the carbon tax, is it really working for us?
Well, as I say, that's a very important question that has to do with the equity. I go to South Africa quite a lot. It's a lovely country, and my goodness, the sun shines in a way it doesn't always shine in Ireland. And, you know, you have huge potential for solar and huge potential for off-grid solar and for the kind of work that Marielle is talking about. And it is true that South Africa is using coal at the moment. I would give a little leeway for dirty energy for the transition, because we need a just transition. But I would still put pressure on countries like South Africa as quickly as possible out of coal, because it's not only affecting smog, South Africa and even mining communities in South Africa, but also it's adding to the burden of the world. But I would say, I cut you more slack. Countries like the United States and Europe should not be using coal. We should be getting out of it now, because it is not acceptable that we're adding further to the burden. Sorry. Yeah.
My name's Heather Moody. I'm from Australia, and that's kind of relevant. Democratic governments tend to focus on re-election, and Australia in particular. Yeah. Given Paris 2015, how do we persuade the governments to have the courage to act on long-term climate justice solutions and to have a genuine commitment to innovation?
I think the only way we persuade them is by the kind of marches that we saw in New York and all around the world. You, as young leaders, have to mobilize. We have to have a movement for leaders to take the responsibility they're not taking. It's not just Australia. We have short-termism in every country, and this is a long-term issue. And we've got to get the pressure from more and more people. In the previous conferences, except for Copenhagen, and the leaders came to Copenhagen without knowing what they were going to do, and it ended up in a Copenhagen Accords, which brought us back into the UN system. We now have a Durban platform where every country knows they have to do something. But if it's left voluntarily, they won't do enough. So we need a legal agreement next year. And Australia is not good, I agree, but there are a lot of good people in Australia. There's the 1 Billion Women Project, 1 million women, where women are committing to reducing their own carbon footprint. And you know, the other speaker from Australia who's doing things. You're the people of Australia. Persuade the government that they have to be part of the future, and every government. That's how we have to do it. Okay. Now I'm going to go back up over here.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name's Dylan Kaplan. I'm from Washington, D.C. in the United States. So first of all, thanks so much for coming, and really do appreciate it, as I'm sure we all do. We know you're pretty busy. So my question is, you've lived a very fascinating life. I have about 1 million questions, but I'm just going to ask you one. When it comes to climate change, what is the most important decision you've ever had to make, and why?
I think it was the decision from a human rights perspective to say, we've got to be talking about climate from a people-centered human rights way. And I established the foundation to do that. And I'm glad that the foundation is in a northern country, in Ireland, because people in the developing world don't need convincing about climate justice. They see climate affecting them every day. But in our part of the world, and in Washington, we don't know how much it's already affecting poor people. So having lived in both worlds, I think that was a key to have a foundation on climate justice, link with NGOs, civil society, social movements, and business. There are a lot of business leaders now who are looking a bit more long-term and know that unless we get on top of climate, we're going to have a very disruptive, bad-for-business world. So, I think it's that kind of broad coalition for change that we need now. And I'm going to keep talking about climate justice. I'm very glad when the Secretary General appointed me as the UN Special Envoy, he said, building on her work on climate justice. So I'm licensed to continue talking about climate justice, also in my UN job, and I will. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name's James from the United Kingdom. Firstly, a suggestion in terms of where to meet up. In the forum downstairs on the left-hand side in the back corner, there's something for returning ambassadors and ideas. So maybe if you meet there at lunchtime, grab your food and meet there specifically so that you can share. And my initiative that I'm doing is something called Friendly Friday. It's about getting people talking and saying hello. So if you've noticed the badges. So convene there and you can find out more. The question then is for Marielle, that I'd like to just understand what your biggest challenge is in terms of doing what you're doing, and then perhaps for Mary, if you can respond perhaps to help Marielle and other people as well in a similar position that are trying to really make a difference.
Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head. We were just talking about this backstage. My biggest challenge is that in order to get to scale, we need the government behind us. So we either need some type of social protection program, we need to create a market by putting a subsidy out there. Whenever you provide a subsidy for something, private businesses rush in to meet that demand because they know that they're going to benefit from the subsidy as well. So we need an investment from the government. We need organizations that are umbrella organizations like the UN to come in and encourage the Kenyan government and the Ugandan government, et cetera, to provide that, because ultimately, these people cannot afford the clean energy solutions that we're asking them to buy. So, Mary, maybe you can talk about how we get that done.
Don't go away. No, we actually have been talking, and I am very, very impressed with what you're doing, Marielle, and the way you've already been able to get to where you are. And now you need to make the next stage in your transformative leadership. And that is either creating a market that isn't quite there yet, in whatever way that can be done, or using social protection, etc. And I hope this lunchtime meeting takes place, and I would love to hear afterwards, maybe from somebody who can coordinate, because my foundation wants to support those who are doing what you're doing, because we have to scale. We cannot, in conscience, have 3 billion people energy poor in the 21st century, knowing that that drives them into deeper poverty and that they're affected by climate. So
we'll get there.
You'll get there.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I've forgotten where I am. I think I'll come back here.
Hi. My name is Agustin. I'm from Argentina. And I have a friend back in Argentina. He's a geologist. And he belongs to this school of thought that believes that climate change is like, okay, it's a very important thing that is happening, but it's not like absolutely our responsibility as human beings. It's like something that is happening, belongs to a cycle of the globe. And I know that it's like a very dangerous thought, and I just want to know, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
I have a lot of talks with him about that.
Yeah.
He's absolutely convinced, and there's a lot of people thinking in that way.
95% of the scientists of the world are absolutely convinced of human causing of climate through fossil fuel greenhouse gas emissions. We've had reports, the 5th assessment reports this year, and we're going to get one in the coming days, which will be the amalgamated report, if you like, and it will shock us. we are in a frightening situation. And anybody who is either a climate denier because the fossil fuel lobby has persuaded them to be, or a genuine person, as I feel your friend is, a geologist, they cannot take away from the scientific, strong evidence that we are not good stewards and we need to change course. I'm actually going to, because I think we're probably going to be running out of time soon, I'm going to suggest that everybody who's standing asks their question, and I'll try at the end to do something like not answering every question, but I'd love to hear all your voices. So let's start up on the balcony. Is there anybody left on the balcony? Yes. All of you up there speak, and then we'll come here, and then we'll come here. Yeah. Yeah. You first, then you, then you, then you. Okay?
Okay, very quickly. So I'm wondering if you have considered the role of technology to fill in this scalability gap that you're having to bring electricity to the mass. So I work for Ericsson, and I think we could use smart meters to connect mobile apps, for example, for donating, for the mass, for the people, not only for NGOs, to activate those meters. So I really think technology could play a good role here.
Thank you. You say we haven't enough time, is that it?
I just wanted to say to the people on the mics, you've got to volunteer up there, just the people who are on the mics, because we will run out of time, okay? Same here, just the one in the front, the others, I'm so sorry, okay? Sorry, Mary.
Okay. I very much agree with you. It's for you to bring the technology. Come on. Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dewey. I'm from Panama, and I'm part of an indigenous group in Panama called the Kuna people. We're actually the first documented case of an indigenous group in Latin America that is forced to move because of the rising of the sea level. We got this news a couple of months ago, and right now there are no funds to move 1,000 people from an island that is about to sink. So my question is, when it comes to this difficult decision of moving a whole community, how would you explain them that they have to leave their homes, to leave their island, and to go and live in mainland, change their whole lifestyle, try to find another way of getting their food, because they normally just went sailing and fishing? How would you explain them that? And also, like, who would be responsible for funding this movement?
I think it's really good that we heard your voice, because you are not alone with that problem as an indigenous community. I have another friend, Ursula Rakova, who's moving her people from a small cataract island to Papua New Guinea. And she explains that they had to acquire the land, and they had to build the relationships. And then she says, as an indigenous person like you, she says, but there's nothing I can do about the fact that we have to leave the land of the bones of our ancestors. It's the saddest thing, especially for an indigenous people. And it will happen more unless we stay as far below the 2 degrees Celsius as possible. And as I say, we're on course for 4 degrees. So your urgency has to be heard more, because we have to realize it's not a thing of the future. It's happening, and it's hurting. And people are, affected deeply about it, as you are. And you should be able to get adaptation funding for whatever the costs are of that displacement. It's serious. Anyway, yeah.
Hello, Caroline from here in Ireland. My question to you is, we've seen a real shift from, in human rights towards criminal convictions around things that are going wrong in terms of human rights. When are we going to see something like that in terms of environmental justice, as you put it, where I think of law?
Yeah, there are those who would like to see a sort of international court on environmental issues, and corporations, for example, being responsible to that court if they affect indigenous peoples or landholders or whatever. Also, I'm glad to say the Human Rights Council, which a few years ago had been active, is now coming back into the picture, passed a resolution that climate is negatively affecting a whole range of human rights. And we'll have a panel discussion in March. And that's another way of getting countries to know that they can be held responsible in some way. But I agree with you. I'd like to see more litigation myself. If there are lawyers among you, think about litigating, because that can help as well. Final one.
Hello, Jens Wiechers. I'll try to keep this short, which might make it sound a little bit harsher than I'm intending it to sound, but I appreciate you are also under temporal constraints here. You said you're cutting countries like South Africa some slack, and I found that one of the most shocking and condescending things to say, because while these countries pollute the environment, while China or South Africa or India pollute the environment massively, they're lifting millions of people out of poverty. And this kind of most important challenge, reconciling energy use, the massive energy use necessary to bring these countries onto any kind of modern level of standard of living with climate justice is a massive challenge that is not currently possible to do with renewable energies only because they cannot afford them, as Marielle also said. So I see the most massive challenge in the area of reconciling that they need more energy, and at the same time we need to somehow prevent the world from heating up more than 2 degrees. It would be even better if it was less, but that is very regularly, and also in your talk here, sidestepped entirely, and the entire moral issue of effectively condemning millions of people to death or to poverty, abject poverty in third world countries, if we enforce any kind of Western standards on coal use, on nuclear use, on oil use, is completely sidestepped usually.
Well, I don't know whether I've been making myself as clear as I would like to, but part of climate justice is to plan for a just transition. We all have to move. The world has to move to zero carbon. And we have to do it, hopefully, by 2050 or as close to that as we can, because otherwise we will not be below 2 degrees Celsius. More small islands will go under. More communities will be flooded. Big cities will be flooded. And we obviously don't want that. And what is the equity and the just transition? Very difficult, I absolutely agree. But I don't think I'm being patronizing when I say that countries like South Africa, with still a large poor population, need to have the time to adjust and the just transition. We also need to leapfrog the technologies. We need to help with financing in the way we're not doing. The Green Climate Fund needs a minimum of 10 and hopefully 15 billion by November of this year. It has 2.4 billion committed already. 1 billion from Germany, 1 billion from France, and 400 from the rest, including Mexico, which is a country with a large poor population, but knows that we need the money for adaptation. So these are all the issues that we struggle with, and we struggle from the perspective of climate justice, and we believe, just as the mobile phone has transformed poor people's lives all over the world, clean technology for the energy poor will transform their lives, and that is doable. It's absolutely doable, and I think this crowd could make a big dint in it as you are ambassadors during the next year. So thank you for wonderful questions, and it's been a great pleasure to hear your points. Thank you very much. Dan.
Will you stay for the launch of the prize? This is your prize.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to announce the World Climate Justice Prize. It's a 10,000 euro prize. You can apply by going to the One Young World website. It's meant to encourage people to learn more about any type of project that is focusing on the importance of climate change with equity, solutions, technology, anything that you guys have mentioned prior. You can also go to supportclimatejustice.org, the website you've been seeing maybe on screen, to support us even further. And of course, Mary Robinson Foundation Climate Justice is the mrfc.j.org. Okay, so thank you for Mary.
Okay, well done.
Thank you, Mary.
Bless you, Mary. See you.
Thank you so much,
All
Marielle.
right.
Thank you, Mary.
David,
it's a real honor to have you, and we'll see you again later.
David,
and for the prize?
Can I just tell a story very quickly? Very quickly. I just wanted to say, you know, we've talked in climate justice and climate change over the last couple of years. We've talked so often about the people. For example, there's a delegate here from Kiribati, the South Pacific Islands that are going to disappear under the rising waters. In 1981, I was sailing in the Caribbean, and we went to visit the Ilha de San Blas, where the Kuna people live. And they're the only indigenous peoples of the Americas who've never been conquered. And they are the world's original and probably the only completely matriarchal society, also the only society that has genuinely lived with a small c, a totally communal communist system. Some of the most incredible people I've ever seen, young men being educated in the United States who went back to their islands because they loved it so much. I did not know that your people were being forced to move. I'm absolutely devastated for you guys. You have to fix this thing. We have to fix this. I'm so sad, so sad.
And we're going to be talking about a lot of very important issues over the next 3 days, but if we don't fix the climate one, actually none of them matter because we won't have a planet. So €10,000 prize, it'll be awarded in Bangkok. Think how you could use that money to do something and really drive some change in the world. And we look forward to seeing the winner in Bangkok. And as we said, all of the details are actually up on the website. So